Speak up with confidence, the simple three-step blueprint. You ever find yourself replaying a conversation in your head, wishing you'd said something different? Like you're brushing your teeth at night, staring at your reflection, and suddenly you're back at that lunch meeting where you fumbled your words or stayed quiet when you had something worth saying. It's this nagging feeling, like you missed a chance to show up as your real self. I had one of those moments a while back, and it stuck with me like a song you can't shake. It was at a family barbecue of all places. The backyard was buzzing, kids running around, burgers sizzling on the grill, my cousins laughing over some old story. I was sitting at a picnic table, half listening to my uncle go on about his new business venture. He's one of those guys who can talk to anyone, anywhere, and make it look effortless. He was explaining his latest idea, something about eco-friendly packaging, and he turned to me all enthusiastic and said, "So what do you think? You've got a good head for this stuff." And I froze. I mean, I had thoughts, plenty of them. I'd been reading about sustainable businesses, even had some ideas about what could make his plan stronger. But in that moment, with everyone's eyes on me, my mind went blank. I mumbled something like, sounds cool, I guess, and changed the subject. The conversation moved on, but I felt this pit in my stomach. It wasn't just that I didn't say what I wanted to, it was that I didn't say anything. I'd had a chance to add something real, to connect, to show I was engaged, and I blew it. Driving home that night, I kept thinking, why do I do that? Why do I clam up when it matters? It wasn't the first time. I'm in my early 50s now, and I've had plenty of moments where I walked away from a conversation feeling like I didn't show up as me. At work, with friends, even with my own kids sometimes. I'd get tongue-tied in meetings or I'd overthink what I was going to say until the moment passed. Other times, I'd say something and immediately regret it, like I'd picked the wrong words or come off too hesitant. I'd watch people like my uncle, people who could walk into a room and own it, not because they were loud or pushy, but because they were so comfortable in their own skin. They'd say what they meant, listen like they cared, and leave you feeling like you just had the best conversation of your week. I wanted that, not to be the loudest guy in the room, but to feel like I could say what I meant and mean what I said without second-guessing myself into oblivion. But here's the thing. I didn't think it was something you could learn. I figured you either had it or you didn't. Like charisma was a gift, handed out at birth to a lucky few. I'd always been the quiet one, the thinker, the guy who'd rather listen than talk. And for a long time, I was okay with that. It worked for me in my 20s, even my 30s. But as I got older, I started noticing how much it was holding me back. Not just at work, where I'd miss chances to pitch ideas or get noticed, but in my personal life too. I'd see my teenage daughter pull away, not because she didn't want to talk, but because I wasn't great at starting those conversations. I'd feel this distance growing, and I hated it. I wanted to be the dad she could open up to, the friend people turned to, the colleague who could hold their own in a debate. But every time I tried to step up, I'd trip over my own doubts. What if I said the wrong thing? What if I sounded dumb? What if they didn't care? That barbecue moment was a wake-up call, not because it was some huge disaster, but because it was so ordinary. It was just another day, another conversation I didn't show up for. And I started wondering, how many more of these moments was I going to let slip by? Was I really okay with going through life feeling like I was only half there in every conversation? I didn't want to be that guy, the one who always has something to say after the fact, in the safety of his own head. But I didn't know where to start. You can't just decide to be confident, right? You can't just flip a switch and suddenly know how to navigate every conversation like a pro. Or so I thought. A few weeks after the barbecue, I was at a coffee shop with an old friend, Sarah. She's a therapist, the kind of person who makes you feel like you're the only one in the room when she's talking to you. We were catching up, and I don't know why, but I brought up the barbecue. I laughed it off like, man, I'm hopeless when it comes to speaking up. But Sarah didn't laugh. She leaned in, gave me this look, and said, "You're not hopeless. You're just out of practice." I must have looked skeptical because she smiled and said, "Look, communicating isn't about being born with a silver tongue. It's about knowing what you want to say and trusting you're worth hearing. That's a skill, not a gift." That stuck with me. A skill, not a gift. It was such a simple idea, but it flipped something in my head. I'd always thought of confidence as this mysterious thing you either had or you didn't. But if it was a skill, that meant I could work on it. I could get better. I asked Sarah what she meant, and she said something I'll never forget. Most people think confidence comes from knowing exactly what to say, but it's not about having the perfect words. It's about being okay with not knowing and showing up anyway. I didn't fully get it then, but it planted a seed. I started wondering, what if I didn't have to have all the answers? What if I could just try? But trying felt scary. Where do you even begin when you've spent years dodging the spotlight? And that's when things started to shift. You know how sometimes you hear something at just the right moment, and it's like the universe is handing you a map? That's what happened a few weeks after that coffee with Sarah. I was at the library picking up a book for my daughter when I wandered into the audiobook section. I wasn't looking for anything specific, just killing time. But I saw this title, Speak Like You Mean It. I don't know why, but I grabbed it. Maybe because I was still chewing on what Sarah said about communication being a skill. I started listening to it in the car, expecting some cheesy motivational stuff. But it wasn't that. The author, this guy who'd spent years coaching people on public speaking, talked about how confidence in conversation isn't about being flawless or charming. It's about clarity and connection. He said something that hit me like a ton of bricks. The goal isn't to sound smart, it's to be understood and to understand. I listened to that audiobook over the next few days, and one part really stuck with me. He talked about this simple framework for any conversation. Listen, reflect, respond. Sounds basic, right? But the way he broke it down made it feel like a blueprint. Listening wasn't just hearing words. It was paying attention to what the other person was really saying, their tone, their pauses. Reflecting was taking a beat to process, to make sure you got it. And responding was about saying something true to you, even if it wasn't perfect. He called it showing up with intention. I like that. It wasn't about winning the conversation or dazzling anyone. It was about being there, fully. I started experimenting with it, not in some grand, life-changing way, but in small moments, like at work, when my coworker was venting about a project gone wrong. Instead of nodding and waiting for my turn to talk, I really listened. I noticed how frustrated she sounded, how her hands were moving faster as she spoke. When she finished, I took a second to reflect, then said, "Sounds like you're carrying a lot with this one. What's the toughest part for you right now?" It wasn't rocket science, but her face softened, and we ended up having this real conversation, not just about work, but about how overwhelmed she'd been feeling. For the first time, I walked away from a talk feeling like I'd shown up as me, not some version of me trying to say the right thing. The more I practiced, the more I noticed something else. Confidence wasn't about never feeling nervous. It was about being okay with the nerves and speaking anyway. I tried it with my daughter, too. One night, she was quiet at dinner, staring at her phone. Normally, I'd let it slide, but I remembered the blueprint. I listened, not just to her silence, but to the way she was sitting, like she was trying to disappear. I reflected, thought about how she'd been stressed about school, and then I responded, not with a lecture, but with a question. "Hey, you seem a little off. Want to talk about what's going on?" She didn't spill her guts right away, but she looked up and we ended up talking for an hour about her classes, her friends, stuff I hadn't realized was weighing on her. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and it felt like a win. What I started to see was that communicating with confidence wasn't about changing who I was. It was about trusting that who I was had something worth saying. The blueprint, listen, reflect, respond, gave me a way to practice, but the real shift was in how I saw myself. I didn't have to be my uncle, charming everyone at the barbecue. I didn't have to be Sarah, making people feel like the center of the universe. I just had to be me, showing up with intention, one conversation at a time. And the more I did it, the easier it got. Not easy, but easier. Like learning to drive a stick shift, jerky at first, but smoother with every try. I still have moments where I fumble, where I walk away thinking, ugh, I could have said that better. But now I don't dwell on it. I just keep going. Because here's the thing, Every conversation is a chance to get better. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have all the answers. You just have to show up, listen, and say what's true for you. That's the blueprint. And the best part, it's never too late to start building it.